Everybody, this is jerningam here. Boris Johnson is written to give commitment, yes, to the advised Brexit backstop. So he's written Boris Johnson has written to Donald Tusk about the backstop agreement.
Also this morning, the Prime Minister has reiterated his opposition to the Irish border backstop. In a letter to the European Council President, Boris Johnson said to Donald Tusk that the plan laid out in the withdrawal agreement is simply unviable and anti-democratic. The letter came after a phone call between Mr Johnson and the Taoiseach Leo Varadkar, who emphasised the importance of continued free trade on the island of Ireland. Sky's political correspondent Tom Rayner reports.
He's yet to hold face-to-face Brexit talks with EU leaders, but yesterday the Prime Minister claimed he thought they would ultimately agree to his terms for a Brexit deal.
Of course, our friends and partners on the other side of the Channel are showing a little bit of reluctance at the moment to change their position. That's fine. I'm confident that they will.
Last night, he set out why he believes they should. In a letter to the President of the European Council, Boris Johnson provided fresh detail on his vision of what a revised Brexit deal could look like, restating his red lines but also suggesting possible next steps. He writes that the backstop cannot form part of an agreed withdrawal agreement because it binds Britain too closely to the EU and risks creating a border in the Irish Sea. In its place, he says he wants to see alternative arrangements with checks away from the border, but in an apparent concession, acknowledges there will be a need for something that offers a degree of confidence about what would happen if these arrangements were not all fully in place at the end of that period. A response from Brussels is expected later and will no doubt set the tone for Mr Johnson's visits to Berlin and Paris in the next few days. But if his phone conversation with the Taoiseach Leo Varadkar yesterday is anything to go by, the EU is unlikely to change course. The Irish leader insistent that the backstop remains an important legal guarantee against a hard border that cannot be removed. In Westminster, opposition parties were dismissive of Downing Street's proposals. Responding to the letter, the Shadow Brexit Secretary, Sir Keir Starmer, said it was evidence the government had no negotiating strategy. He said it didn't specify what the alternative arrangements could be or what the alternative to the backstop could be. And the Liberal Democrats went further, suggesting the letter pointed to a no-deal exit.
This seems to me more like a parting shot from a Prime Minister who is now focused on delivering no deal and seeking to blame others, in this case the European Union, for that outcome.
Whether the EU will be quite as swift to reject the Prime Minister's letter is yet to be seen, but his requests are not wholly dissimilar to those made unsuccessfully by his predecessor. The difference, according to Mr Johnson, is that he is ready to walk away and Parliament will be unable to stop him. Tom Rayner, Sky News, Westminster.
Let's get more from our political correspondent Tamara Cohen here on Sunrise. She's in Westminster now, and it's interesting what Tom was saying there, Tamara. Is Boris Johnson actually trying to get a deal?
Well, Sarah Jane, the letter points out that time is short and the deadline is fast approaching. And what Boris Johnson is proposing in this letter, now here in black and white, we've heard him say it before, but here he's setting out his red lines to the EU, getting rid of the backstop and replacing it with something that they will have to come up with in the next 2 years, some kind of alternative. And the initial reaction we were getting here from EU sources last night is that they were going to be pretty unimpressed with the idea that the backstop that they spent 2 years negotiating, a legal guarantee, would be replaced with an unspecified alternative. And Boris Johnson says some kind of commitment that he would be flexible in negotiating in case it wasn't ready to go. These alternative arrangements weren't ready to go in 2 years' time. So we await the official response of the EU, which is expected later today. But certainly his conversation with the Irish Taoiseach seems to set the tone for what we expect later this week. Boris Johnson is going to Berlin tomorrow to meet with Angela Merkel, to Paris on Thursday to meet with Emmanuel Macron, and we expect he's going to get the same message there, which is the withdrawal deal is already done and dusted, and they don't want to reopen it in order to have this renegotiation that Boris Johnson is suggesting. So potentially a frosty reception from EU leaders as they go to the G7 summit later this week. But perhaps a warmer one from Donald Trump. Boris Johnson also spoke to him last night, and the president tweeted overnight that they had a great conversation, and he thinks that they could move forward rapidly towards a US-UK trade deal. The only thing that might scupper that is, of course, the backstop, because we've now also heard from senior Democrats, including their leader in the Senate, Chuck Schumer, who says that if the Good Friday Agreement is put in jeopardy, if there is a hard border in Northern Ireland, then US politicians will block any trade deal from going ahead.
Well, I don't know what to say about that, but it's kind of ridiculous that it's taken them all this time to just sort it out.
I would like publicly to express my deep gratitude for the constant support with which he has honored me. I would like to thank all the members of Parliament who have been part of the majority for giving me the possibility to serve Italy. I would like to thank also all the members of Parliament of the opposition. You have criticized me. You have disagreed with my opinions. But everyone who has intervened in this chamber, I have always understood your attitude and your roles, and that you have had consideration for me. This experience will leave me a great legacy. It has enriched me greatly, and I hope it has given me things that I will be able to transmit to younger people who are listening to us in their homes. Great trust and hope for the future of our country.
Well, in very deep thought again, like I always am, guys. In very deep thought. See what this is. Why does
White supremacy is a growing global threat, and nowhere more than in America. The recent El Paso shooting was not an isolated event, but part of a rise in white racial violence. The hate fueling the ideology is hardly new, but why is it rising?
White supremacy has been on the rise since the 1990s, sparked by anti-immigrant policies and xenophobic actions on both the political left and right in both Europe and the United States. This thing combined with institutionalized Islamophobia, with the 2008 economic crisis, creating this perfect storm in which a range of political entrepreneurs who have been able to exploit white racial resentment and translate that into electoral gains and the normalization of extremist language in everyday political life.
Recent years have seen the 2015 attack on a black church in Charleston, the 2017 car attack in Charlottesville, and in 2018 the shooting at a synagogue in Pittsburgh, and beyond America, attacks at mosques in Christchurch, and then the shooting in El Paso. Trump's failure to call the El Paso attack an act of terrorism has certainly angered many. So how should we be reporting these crimes? If a white supremacist commits mass murder, are they a terrorist?
We do not have a terrorism statute that applies to domestic ideology-inspired extremisms. Because those are not associated with a foreign terrorist organization, you can't charge them with a terrorism crime. They can argue that it's very prejudicial to be called a terrorist.
The FBI has seen an increasing number of domestic terrorism-related arrests compared to last year, and confirmed many of those extremists were in fact white supremacists. But in 2019, there's still a cultural misunderstanding of what a terrorist looks like.
Most Americans just equate terrorist, the terrorist label, with Islamist extremist terrorism. And that sort of made sense after 9/11, when we come out of the biggest terrorist attack in our history. As that threat has changed, and as we understand now that terrorism is not limited to Islamist extremist terrorism, it's very important for Americans to realize that, not equate terrorist with Islamist extremists or with Muslims.
It seems America has some way to go to understand that the biggest terrorist threat it is facing lies uncomfortably close to home.
Well, that's how it goes, I think. That's how it goes, my friends.
He appeared at Reading Magistrates Court accused of killing PC Andrew Harper, who died on Thursday evening while responding to reports of a burglary in the village of Salemstead in Berkshire.
On behalf of him and his family, he emphatically denies any responsibility or involvement in the horrific murder of PC Andrew Harper. We urge the police to follow every single line of inquiry to prove who is responsible and to ensure that there is justice in this case.
That's the officer who died on his duty in the UK.
The murder
Reading.
of PC Andrew Harper is a mindless and a brutal crime, and obviously all our thoughts are with his family, his friends, and his colleagues.
Tommy's rumbling and very hungry. To get some food in a minute, guys, in real life. Oh, good God. I'm going to show you what's happening on this, guys. Mattresses are flying in the air. I mean, strong wind. I mean, whirlwind. Craziness, that is. That's what wind can do. It can make mattresses fly in the sky. Or waterproof beds. It was quite interesting.
With the prospect of a no-deal Brexit increasingly likely, British residents are preparing for what may arise after leaving the EU. A survey released this Monday reveals that they spend around €4.3 billion stockpiling goods. The research found that 800,000 people had already spent more than €1,000 preparing for the potential food shortages. Food and medicine are the most popular items. 3 out of 4 of the surveyed said they bought extra provisions, and 50% bought extra medicines and drinks. If the UK leaves the European Union without a deal, businesses predict there will be short-term supply problems. But the no-deal Brexit can also worsen Europe's medicine shortage. Every month, about 45 million packs of medicines are shipped from Britain to the rest of the bloc. The pharmaceutical companies warn that some drugs might not have the necessary approvals by then to continue being imported from Britain. Plus, the increased customs controls between Britain and the EU could also disrupt supplies of drugs and the chemical compounds needed to produce them. The Brexit fears and economic shrink of the UK in the second quarter of this year saw the pound plunge for a 10-year low against the euro last week, but the sterling has recovered some value this Monday.
The Irish backstop key. Brexit borders, Northern Ireland. Euro news. I shall catch you guys all in the next video. Hope you all enjoyed this one. Please like, comment, subscribe, share these videos with your friends. I'm very hungry, my tummy keeps rumbling, so I'm going to sort my tummy out. You know, everybody has to eat. I'll catch you in the next stream, guys. Peace.